Yes. Good evening, members. Welcome to this new platform. I hope it's a simple and user-friendly platform for all the members. You can type in the chat box also. Members, good evening, members. We'll start within 1 or 2 minutes. Still members are joining. Maybe it's a new platform, so they are not used to, because there is a basic difference in Zoom platform and GoToWebinar is Zoom you always used to get the link and you have to click on that link and you have to enter, where in GoToWebinar you have to register yourself on that link and then you'll get able to get into this webinar. This webinar will also available on YouTube after this session, not immediately, not live, but after this session. Members, we are also since it's in trial mode, after 1 or 2 more webinars we will be able to give the credit hours and certificate for this webinar also. So we'll start. Good evening and a warm welcome, very warm welcome from team training and education of ISLA. Today we have Mr. Atul Kapoor. Today's webinar is on approach in detecting fraud under fire claims. The session will be start now, and in last 15 minutes you can have interaction with Mr. Atul Kapoor sir. So you can write us your question on the chat box also, and question and answer session also. So thank you Atul sir, and thank you all the members. I will request to Atul Kapoor sir to start your session.
Thank you so much, Sachin. I'm very grateful to all of you for having spared the time once again. Let's hope we can spend this in a manner where we can have something new out of this session. So let's go on to the main presentation itself. Okay, sorry friends, let's just move on. Well, today's topic, as we all know, frauds in particularly fire claims. I will try to take you through my experience in the last 35 years with some brief case studies as well. And let's hope we find something a little bit different from ordinary in these case studies. So let's first things first, let's go on to identifying the different types of frauds. Basically, is that a question? Can I go on? All right. So there are basically 2 types of frauds that I would classify. One is the intentional fires, where the cause of fire itself is intentionally created and not accidental, and therefore this type of fraud, frankly, I cannot prevent as a surveyor, I can only detect. But the second type of fraud, which is after an accidental fire, if the claim gets exaggerated, then I can to some extent prevent that. In fact, I feel confident that we as a fraternity should be able to prevent that. And this effort today is in that direction, that we are collectively able to eradicate these frauds. On the first part, the intentional fires, well, my personal experience is the eye for detail. The surveyor has to always keep his eyes and ears open and look for detail. anything that is logically should not be there at site is present there. The other thing is there should be a logical spread of fire, not only the origin of fire, but there should be a spread of fire as well. So not only origin of fire, but also the spread of fire should be logically explained. For example, from one section to the other section, to the very last edge where the fire is evident, the flow, the spread of fire should be logically explainable. For example, from one room to the other, from one floor to the other, from one section to the other. It is most important to rule out multiple sources of fire because that is the biggest area where you can catch an intentional fire. Eyewitnesses, guards, we all know, neighbors. Strangely, I will advise all of our friends to discreetly talk to tea vendors on the street. They can give you the most vital information, as we will see somewhere down the line when I discuss one of the case studies. The photos and videos of the media during firefighting, because we reach a little late. But fortunately for us, the media is right there on the spot as soon as they hear things. It is not only the photos that they print, not only the videos that they upload, but they also have 100 other photos in their library, which they keep clicking. Some of them can be very useful in detecting intentional fires. CCTV recordings, we found these to be extremely useful, particularly in today's context. CCTVs, more and more factories, more and more organizations are adopting CCTVs and recording those. It's very useful to rule out an intentional fire when you're not very sure. Sometimes CCTV recordings can clearly tell you the origin of the fire. Of course, there is a concept of forensic investigation by independent expert agencies, which is quite prevalent now. But we will just in the next few slides see the limitations of that. And my suggestion or my experience is that despite that being there, the surveyor needs to be ever vigilant, because on its own, the forensic investigation report seldom, very often is not able to hold its water in a court situation. Proper recording of evidence is, of course, the photos, video statements, ensures confirmations. That is very essential before cleaning the site. We will see this as we go along. Accidental cause but exaggerated claims. Now, mostly it is probably easier in the case of stocks, where the claims tend to get exaggerated. It's important to, for example, on day one itself, identify the items which are not physically available in the debris, but are being claimed. I will give you an example. There was some claim in which I was there on site till about 8:30 in the evening, outstation claim. The drive back was about 5 hours. But nevertheless, just before moving out, we made him confirm that is there any item which has burnt to ash? Because the other items did not seem to be such which could burn to ash. So before giving that confirmation, the insured took another half an hour and suddenly comes up with a strange figure of 2 crores for material burnt to ash, one single item called some chemical called master batch. Well, master batch is mainly used for giving color to the product. So for 2 crores of master batch, it would be tons and tons. So then the whole question erupted that even though it's late, even though there is no light, whatever, we need to freeze this right away. What was the master batch doing there? Because master batch should be in the store. What was it doing in the production area? And that too in so much quantity, whether it is physically there. So suddenly we decided to confront him with all that. And we had to make sure that those issues were sorted out before we moved out, because once the site is cleaned, it would be very difficult to establish that. So if there is some item which is burnt to ash and not physically quantifiable, then the insured should confirm on day one those items, what are those items? And if not the exact quantity, at least the maximum estimated quantity and in terms of value, and then the surveyor will need to take a call whether what further needs to be done. The other important thing is to freeze the in and out records. We find mostly the gate records. Most of the time, the gate is a little isolated from the main factory or from the main premises. And in a reasonable sized premises, sometimes you have independent security guards manning the gate, who are, the least they do is to write on a register who is coming, who is going, what is coming, what is going out. Even if everything is burnt, the gate records are the best way to freeze the in and outs from the premises, so that the insured later cannot just keep adding more and more bills or more and more incoming materials into the claim. And the most important thing, of course, is as and when the documents are coming to us, let's have an eye open and let's scrutinize those documents physically, more carefully, because a fraudulent document sometimes is crying out loud. चीख चीख के बोल रहा होता है वो कई बारी कि यार मैं fraudulent हूँ मुझे पकड़ो. But sometimes we tend to miss it. We will look through some of these as we go along. Okay, forensic investigation, few limitations which we must as surveyors keep in mind. It doesn't absolve us from any responsibility. हमारी responsibility पूरी की पूरी वहीं की वहीं कायम है. Firstly, the forensic investigator has no legal locus standi, because regulations only recognize the surveyor. I have known of instances where the insured has clearly said he will not cooperate with the forensic auditor, or sorry, the forensic investigator, because the surveyor is the only person authorized from the insurance company to look into his claim. Of course, there is a way to circumvent that, because the regulations provide that the surveyor can appoint a forensic agency as an expert. But nevertheless, in some cases, the report is not conclusive in terms of the admissibility of the claim or even the impact on the claim. For example, the best a forensic investigation report can tell us is that maybe there was use of some accelerants, hydrocarbons, in the samples that they found. But then, does that mean that the claim is not admissible automatically? Does it lead to that conclusion? Perhaps not. Because as we know, in a fire policy, if the fire has originated due to a malicious act of a third party, even then the claim is payable. So therefore, merely the forensic report telling us that there is accelerant being used is not enough to really conclude that a claim is to be repudiated. There can be other situations where the products being manufactured by the insured themselves may have some element of hydrocarbons, some element of accelerants. For example, we know of a case where the forensic report tells about hydrocarbons present, and everything, the salvage has been done by the time again, I'm getting a message that I'm not audible. Sachin, can somebody tell me if I'm audible? Hello? Hello? Okay. So in that particular instance, the salvage was disposed without prejudice and everything, and later the forensic report says that there are hydrocarbons. Now the insured said that you should have told me before salvage disposal, because I lacquer those utensils with some kind of a chemical which may have those hydrocarbons. So the surveyor cannot really absolve himself from this responsibility. The possible remedies. My personal feeling is that we must reach a stage where the forensic audit investigator should share his findings with the insured, take their response, incorporate that in the forensic report, and then only treat it as final. I have no clue why most insurers are not really insisting that the forensic report be shared with the insured. In extreme cases, the insured could even be asked that if he's not satisfied with the forensic report, then he should hand it over to the police to investigate the matter further. Because the problem is that as per the law of the land, the police is the investigating agency to decide who is, whether it is a crime or not a crime. So the findings have to be conclusively corroborated with evidences in the survey report, which is the best chance of avoiding fraudulent claims. Independently, the forensic or investigation report on its own is not enough. It has to be ultimately conclusively substantiated with documents, with evidences, and the best I feel, sometimes it is difficult for a surveyor also to prove that there has been a fraud. But the best way is to put the insured on the back foot. The best way is to constantly remind that it is the insured's duty to prove his loss. So therefore, let's just go into some of the policy conditions in a fire policy which help us or which are relevant. Okay.
You are very much audible, sir.
Okay, I keep getting a message that I'm losing signal, so I don't know.
No.
Anyway.
It's fantastic, sir. Please keep it on.
Fine. If there is a problem, you please call me.
Okay, sir.
Right. So let's look at a few conditions of the fire policy which are relevant in this scenario. One is general condition number 1. This, of course, talks about policy being voidable in the event of a misrepresentation, misdescription, or non-disclosure. Personally, I feel this is intended to apply to information given before taking a policy and not the information given after the claim. So I think that's the general interpretation most of us are following. So let's park this general condition number 1 aside. Now, general condition number 6. The insured shall also at all times, at his own expense, produce, procure, and give to the company all such further particulars, plans, specifications, everything is listed, and proofs and information with respect to the claim and origin and cause of loss. So this is very wide. Proofs and information with respect to the claim and origin and cause of loss, and any matter touching liability. Now, fortunately, this is quite wide, and I find that most of the time we have to rely on this condition to help us, because this is the ammunition we have. The other ammunition, of course, is general condition 8. We will discuss in the next slide, but that talks about fraud. Sometimes it is not very easy to establish a fraud. So that's like a Ramban, that's like the ultimate. But most of the time, I think we have to take recourse in general condition number 6 and put the insured on the back foot. Sometimes, see, what happens is it's also a psychological game. Sometimes you tell the insured that you're a liar, that you're committing a fraud. He will always try to defend himself. Sometimes you have to have a strategy that you tell him that, boss, everything is fine, but you have to establish your loss, and your documents are not establishing it. So until you establish it, so that's like giving the insured a kind of a face-saving way out of the situation rather than calling a spade a spade. अब उसको चोर बोलोगे वो कहेगा जी मैंने चोरी नहीं की. So sometimes you have to follow this condition and sort of push him on the back foot and make sure that he himself backs out, he himself withdraws a fraudulent claim, or sort of comes to a situation where he realizes his mistake. By virtue of this condition, the insured is required to establish not only the admissibility but also the quantum of loss. So the onus is on the insured. So I feel every time in every correspondence that we send, especially so in a fraudulent claim or a suspected fraudulent claim, sometimes the correspondence will take us more than a day just to make one letter of a 1 page. Because you have to keep in mind how he's going to react, what are the policy terms, how does it apply to the given situation. And always you have to throw the onus back on the insured. that you have to prove your loss. So far, you've not been able to, just because you've given a police report saying it's accidental, it's a DD entry, police has not done any investigation. So prima facie, it does not mean that this is conclusive evidence that the loss is accidental. So you have to keep pushing him back. So you have to tell him that you have to prove other ways with which you have to prove the cause of loss. General Condition 8, of course, talks about fraud. It clearly talks about false declaration. If the claim is in any respect fraudulent, any fraudulent means or devices are used, it is caused by any willful act or with the connivance of the insured, then all benefits under this policy are forfeited. All benefits. तो अगर एक भी उसने आपको fraudulent bill दे दिया, एक भी fraudulent part of the claim कर दिया, कहीं भी उसने कुछ, even if the cause is genuine, still you as a surveyor have the right to invoke this condition, and the insurance company has a right to repudiate the claim. It is not that supposing that one bill is fraudulent, you can just ignore that bill, remove that item, and give the other part of the claim. This policy condition gives the power to the insurer to reject the entire claim. Whether they want to do it or not, it's their problem. But as far as the surveyor is concerned, I think we should highlight this part and leave it to the insurance company that this, once you have established that there is a fraudulent or a willful intent, then you can just mention this in our report, saying that the liability would be viewed by the insurer in light of this condition. Now, willful act and connivance, as we discussed, is sometimes not so easy to establish. Particularly in a court of law, supposing it goes to that, and most of the claims of a certain value will go to court. So even if there are accelerants in the sample, the court says, now how are you going to prove that this has been willfully done by the insured himself? But the second part, the false declaration, the fraudulent means being adopted, that's a little easier sometimes. But once the material has been taken back by the supplier, there is no question of a claim. So if he's claiming that and giving us bills to support that quantity, it's a clear case of a false declaration. It clearly falls within policy condition 8. In the second case, in fact, this case is still under process, and the report is probably going in a day or two. There was some machines which were initially stated to be non-operational for the last 5-6 years. And that's the way the physical evidence is also indicated, that these were not actually operational for the last 5-6 years. Fortunately, we took that in writing. We took a few statements from the operators, from the eyewitnesses, from everybody, that these were not operational for the last 5-6 years. Now, suddenly, it forms part of the claim. So we went back to him. We said, this is not done. These were in any case non-operational. Even if you're claiming for it, you please claim for the scrap value or whatever which existed before. Now he first insisted, but then we had to sort of educate him about the general condition 8 that we are talking about in this particular slide. And we said that this constitutes only one part of your claim, my friend. एक बहुत बड़ा part आपका stock में है. This probably constitutes 40-50 lakhs. That constitutes 4 crores. It's like being penny wise, pound foolish. Why are you doing this? So I think some sense went into him. But before we talked to him, he had already given us in writing that these machines are actually not 5 years, but 5 months old, which were not operational. Before that, they were operational. So we had 2 statements from him, one saying 6 years, one saying 3 or 4 months or whatever. That also can be a cause for a misdeclaration. So that also qualifies under general condition 8, because then he's trying to use some fraudulent means or devices, giving one of the statements is false. So ultimately he withdrew his claim for the machine, and hopefully the insurers will look at it in a way that they will pay the claim for the stocks, and the claim for the machine stands withdrawn. A very interesting case came across in the Mumbai floods long ago. There was a pharmaceutical manufacturing company, and they had a big warehouse in Bhiwandi near Bombay, and they used to export in bulk these bulk chemicals, bulk drugs. A large part of the claim was constituted by a drug called azithromycin, which is of course an antibiotic. The rate, perhaps, if I remember right, was around 4,000 rupees a kg. But there didn't seem to be, since it was in drums, it was a large bulk product, and only some stickers were stuck in paper. Some of them had got washed away because of the flood. So we insisted on testing the material. Surprisingly, the test resulted in the material turning out to be paracetamol, discrocine. Paracetamol's value is 200 rupees or 250 rupees a kg, whereas azithromycin is 5,000 rupees a kg. I think it's a clear case falling under general policy condition number 8, and therefore fit for repudiation. May I just pause and request your attention on note 1 given below, that mere exaggeration of a claim due to interpretation issues should not, in my opinion, invoke policy condition 8. ऐसा हो जाता है कई बारी. I'll share with you a personal experience where a 10-12 crore claim, we were appointed for reassessment in those days. It was assessed by a very learned friend from the fraternity. The assessment was very peculiar. He said that, okay, the 10 crore claim actually should be probably 7 crores, 8 crores, whatever. But then he very systematically proved that the material was old, and therefore substantial part of the material should have substantially less value. And he determined that the value should be 50% as per market inquiries, etc. So he's clearly saying that the cost is 100, but the market value should be 50 because these items were old, not usable, or not saleable at the same price. Fine, he reduced the assessment from 100 to 50. I'm with that. और उसके बाद उन्होंने लास्ट में जाके एक बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग ट्विस्ट कर दिया. He said that because the value of the product is say 50 and the insured is claiming 100, therefore it's a case of exaggeration and this policy condition was invoked and the claim should be repudiated. In that I have serious cause for concern. I think that once you're saying that the cost is actually what the insured is claiming, then there should be no issue of, it's only an interpretation issue. The insured need not be so savvy about the assessment parameters, and that's our job. And merely because the assessment is coming down to 50% or even 40, 30%, 40%, whatever, should not really be a cause for invoking this condition. Well, fraudulent fire claims, mostly I associate with fraudulent stock claims, because unfortunately, stock losses are very fraud friendly. Why are they fraud friendly? Why are they susceptible to exaggeration? Well, because they're relatively smaller items, frequently moving items. The value of these items keep going up and down. So it's difficult to physically establish sometimes. A large variety and large quantity of each could be affected in even small fires or medium fires. It's difficult for the surveyor to actually physically get into each item. There are a lot of us who are forced to choose a situation that, okay, I've seen the fire, I've taken photographs, please make a list and send me, and I'll come and recheck. Several quantities cannot be identified or quantified after the fire or a flood. There is a situation of old or defective, non-saleable stock. Insured stocks can be lying at multiple locations as part of his business process. There can be multiple godowns, there can be job workers. So a little difficult to monitor. It's very easy for an insured who has some material lying with his job worker to say that he had it lying in his premises. And it's sometimes not so easy for the surveyor to be able to locate that, unless you're looking for these kind of loopholes, unless you have an open eye. So eye for detail is very important. Sometimes detailed stock records are not practical. In fact, fortunately or unfortunately, whichever way you look at it, stock records in many cases are not mandatory. Our policy also does not specify that there has to be a stock record. So what happens in a situation where there is no stock record? You have to find other ways, and there can be tendency to exaggerate. They can be easily removed without informing the insurers or the surveyors after a fire. We know of a case where one investigator, one preliminary surveyor, one final surveyor, 3 of them were appointed at the same time. And all 3 of them visited the site. And they were there right from day 1. But after 6 months, we got a call from one of the head offices that we need you to be a joint surveyor. And we actually went and proved that material had been removed from under the noses of all 3 of our brothers. It's not difficult. It's pretty easy for an insured if he wants to do it. We will look at a case study on this shortly. The other peculiar thing about stock frauds is that sometimes I feel sympathetic towards the insured, because कई बार क्या होता है कि the loss is genuine, but the poor fellow is showing a different value in his books due to other reasons, maybe due to banking, maybe due to finance, maybe due to sometimes jacking up his prices, share prices, sometimes going in for public issues. He's manipulating his books in a way that the stocks shown in the books are not matching with reality. A big incident ho gaya. Now what does he do? If he tells you the truth, he gets caught by all those agencies whom he's tried to fool all these years. So sometimes that can also be a factor where you might find exaggeration of claims or fraudulent manifestation of claims. Let's look at some red flags that could sort of be identified by a surveyor. I think we all know about the gross profit variance, and it's very logical. But I'll try to examine some of the finer detail. Now let's just go through these figures. In 2014-15, now this is the Chennai floods case, and the insured does not have stock records. So therefore, everything has to be done based on books. In 14-15, the closing stock is 62.64 lakhs. This goes at the opening for the year of loss. But at the time of loss, in December 2015, when the floods came, this stock rises up to more than 2 crores. Now, the moment this happens, all of us will sit up and wonder the reason for this. So when you look into the reason, on the face of it, the first reason that strikes is that the insured has tried to inflate his gross profit rate from 28% suddenly to 41%. Because most of us are aware that once the material, if there are no books, there are no stock books, no stock records, then the closing stock is calculated by taking the gross profit rate, unless the closing stock is physically visible. So this first impression given is that the gross profit rate has increased. So this is a cause for worry. And this seems to be the cause for the increase in the closing stock. Now I will, as we always do, we tend to replace this gross profit rate with the past trend and see what should be the closing stock. So let's just do it in the next slide. Here I've inserted a column for the past GP trend. So I've taken the same 28.79% for the period of loss and calculated the gross profit to be 398, and the balancing figure of stock now comes to 30 lakhs only, and as 30.94 lakhs. As 30 lakhs was intact, therefore the loss based on this methodology should be only less than a lakh. But the discussion issue here is, till here I think we are all following, I think most of us are doing in fire claims. But the discussion here is that this is not a fire claim, it's a flood claim. And the entire stock is physically available. Now what happens? Now, on the one side, you're seeing a stock physically there. On the other side, the records, the past trend does not justify it. So as a surveyor, I have three options. One, first I see whether there are stock records or not. Because it could happen. Every business goes through a cycle. It could happen that suddenly he has done some new innovation, some rates have gone up, some petroleum product market rates have gone up suddenly. He had old stocks which he has sold for higher value. So this GP rate could be genuine also. Let's not rule out that possibility. So if the stock records are there, it is easy for me to check each incoming, each outgoing, each bill, the rates, everything. Then maybe I will go by the stock records. Personally speaking, then it will be difficult for me to say, if I don't find any variances in the stock record, it might be difficult for me to say that I should apply the past GP and reduce the loss, especially when the items are physically available. But if there are no stock records, then I think it will be difficult for me to justify so much increase in the gross profit rate. Of course, the insured might say that these rates have gone up, the prices have gone up, but it will be difficult for me to quantify whether the GP because of that should go up from 28% to 30%, 35%, 40%. Why 41%? Ultimately, I might have to succumb to the insured's version if I cannot prove anything. But here, I'll just draw your attention to a very small item, a seemingly small item of job work, which this party does. The job work income is only 2.5 lakhs. But sometimes the value of the job work material can be multiple times that of the job work that he's doing. Sometimes very expensive product can come to me just for polishing. The polishing charge may be peanuts. So I think in this example, I'm actually trying to focus your attention on this little item of job work. It could well be that this material that is physically being shown to me may have come for job work from some other party. And that could explain that the insured is trying to increase his claim or his closing stock by justifying a higher gross profit margin. So my request here only is to have an eye for detail, go into some, just because an item is small or not being not enough to attract our attention, please do not ignore the fine print. Just like we tell the insured, don't ignore the fine print in the policy. I think we all should not ignore the fine print that the insured's documents, the insured's records are trying to tell us. As I have already discussed, if there were no stock records, if there were stock records and stock registers explaining each entry of incoming and outgoing, and if I am able to justify this job work, what were these materials, where they have come from, what was the job work material in stock at the time of loss, then just because there is an increase in gross profit rate is not enough for me to say that this is a case of exaggeration. I think that's another point that I would like to highlight, because let's not be mechanical. Let's not follow the convention mechanically. One more interesting tool that we have in financial data analysis would be the stock turnover. Now, this actually measures that compared to your monthly sale, how much stock are you holding? Many of us are using it. And again, this only gives you a ballpark. It gives you a trend. It does not give you a specific certainty for an assessment, but it gives you some pointers. It gives you ideas, and you have to delve on them. You have to think on them. You have to expand them. उसके अंदर आपको काम करना पड़ेगा. उसके अंदर फिर आपको सोचना पड़ेगा कि हमने इसकी इंटरप्रिटेशन ऐसी आ रही है तो क्या ऐसा तो नहीं. For example, in this case, let us take a case where the closing stock in the various years, as per the previous audited balance sheets, are 47 lakhs, 59 lakhs, 85 lakhs, 89 lakhs. Now, just looking at the closing stock figures, it does not seem to be alarming because the 2013 figures are audited much before the loss has taken place. I have no reason to challenge those or deny those. So if he had 85 lakhs of stock here and 89 lakhs of stock here, it does not raise any alarm to start with. Sales, gross profit, everything I have listed here. And I have tried to calculate based on, after reducing the gross profit, what is the cost of sale? What is the cost of the material that he sold in this year? I come at a figure of 137, 184, 152. So the sale minus the gross profit will give us the cost of sale. The sale includes his profit. You reduce the profit, you'll get the cost of sale. Once I have the cost of sale for the previous years, I divide it by 12 and I get the monthly cost of sale. That every month he's selling material of 11 lakhs, the cost 11 lakhs, 15 lakhs, 12 lakhs. And he's holding stocks of this, row 1. So if I divide row 1 by row 5, I get the holding of stock in the number of months. That means if I'm selling stocks of 12 lakhs every month and I'm holding stocks of 85 lakhs, 85 divided by 12 gives me 6.75, which means that the stock that I'm holding at the end of 2013 is actually 6 months of my sale. Previous to that, it was 3 months. Previous to that, it was 4 months. Now, 3 to 4 months is normal in any industry. I would think so. But suddenly in this 2013, the 6 months seems a little high. But when I look at the period from 1st April to the date of loss, this also is a substantial period of more than 9-10 months. Here, this stock goes up to 10 months of stock. That is abnormal, totally abnormal. So if I'm selling material costing 85 lakhs in the whole year, or say in the 10 months, then I'm holding 89 lakhs worth of stock. Doesn't make sense. So maybe what we did in this particular situation is that we gave him the benefit of the average of the last 3 years, which was working out of 4.92 months. So we said, okay, on an average, if your business is doing normal, then it may be in your case, even though the 6% is high, but okay, even if I go by that, it would be normal to expect that you might have 4 to 5 months of stock in a normal situation. But against this, you're having 10 months. That means half your stock is piling up. Only half your stock is fresh. This 4 months of stock is fresh, which is about, you can go through these, if somebody wants to calculate, he can later go through these remarks so that you can calculate how this has arrived at. But it is based on the above figures, based on the above figures, it is reasonable to expect that about 42 lakhs worth of material would be fresh. And the remaining 47 lakhs should be old, which has been piling up. You can see this pile up trend here also. You can see that the stock has piled up from 3 months to 6-7 months. So this trend has been coming from this year and following up in this year of the loss as well. If we say, for example, based on market inquiries, etc. Now this old stock doesn't have zero value. So based on market inquiries, you have to determine what could be perhaps the value reasonably allocated to this old stock, depending on the product. In this case, supposing we decide that on an average, the value would be 50%. Then on this 47 lakhs, we apply a 50% deduction because of the old stock. And the overall reduction on the total stock translates to about 26-27%. So I cannot exclude this entire stock as old, saying that it has no value. I can only reduce it to its normal, logical, reasonable market value. And therefore, it comes down to about 26-27% on the total stock. So this clearly shows that in the sales also, if you proportionately calculate 166 or 180 in the 12 months and 89 in about 10 months, if you proportionally calculate, there is a clear trend of dropping sale and increasing stock, which clearly indicates that the stock is piling up, apparently due to loss of market demand. So that's the way that we could perhaps use this stock turnover ratio to look at dead stock. It is sometimes customary to apply a flat 5%, 2%, 2.5%. It's customary to do that, but can be challenged. So I would suggest we could apply some of these innovative methods to determine the old stock. Now I come to a particular document which is being widely used as one of the supporting documents for us. All insurers, all surveyors are normally asking for the income tax returns. Sorry, give me a break. All of us are normally asking for income tax returns. I have seen insurance companies ask for all sorts of documents even after you're giving the survey report. They ask for all sorts of bills. They tell the insured, give us bills for 2 years, give us income tax returns for 2 years, give us this return, that return. But very often I ask them, boss, you're asking for so many documents. Are you willing and capable to look into all of them? Because tomorrow, the more documents you ask, you are absolving the surveyor of his responsibility. The more you ask, now it's your responsibility. You have to answer the auditors. So I'll highlight a few things in the income tax return. Of course, I think most of us know that the returns need to be looked at to compare what profit and loss accounts they are giving us. Are they matching with those returns and everything? Yes, those, I'm not repeating those. Some things we are all doing it. But maybe some of us are not seeing some of the fine print. So I'll just highlight the top right quadrant of these two returns in the next sheet. This part and this part. Now we know that this loss is dated 6th Jan 2016, and these two returns are pertaining to assessment year 2014-15 and 15-16. So these are well before the date of loss. But I would suggest to all of us that the first thing we look at in the income tax return after we are done with the figures is to see whether this is the original return or the revised return. Now, interestingly, you will see that both these returns mention this is a specific column in the return, original or revised. And if you see my cursor, this clearly shows us that this is a revised return. So does this one. So the interesting part here is, then what did the original return say? Now the law gives the insured the option to revise his return if he has discovered any error. So if he's trying to pass off a revised return to me, it becomes my duty to understand what was the original return, what was the need for revision, and what are the areas in which the figures have been revised. The second most important thing in my mind, which I think not only for income tax returns, but for every government document that we look at, sometimes not easy, but wherever we can, is to see the date of filing. We do it often in bank statements. The loss has taken place on 5th of July. We take the bank stock statement of 30th June and move on. not realizing that the bank stock statement of 30th June has to be filed within 15 days. So he can very well go and file that after the loss and say whatever he wants to say. So that really is not a very good evidence for a surveyor. Same way in this case. Not only are these two returns revised returns, but you see the date of filing? They are both filed on 17th February 2016. Look here and look here. And our date of loss is 6th Jan 16. So if somebody has revised his returns, he's taken the trouble, revised his returns, given me the revised returns even for the last 2 years, and filed it after the loss, 1 month after, definitely. And if he's not even asked me as a surveyor, I think the first thing a genuine insured would go and do, if this revision is genuine, is perhaps to ask his CA and then to ask the surveyor. Okay, bhai, mere se ye problem hai, mere ko ye galti ho gayi hai. You tell me, is it okay? Should I revise my return? What should I do? So if he's not told me and he's doing this behind my back, most probably there is likely to be a different reason. I'll take you through a case we did where genuine loss, everything genuine, but it was a fire in a office block of a company that owns various departmental stores. Let's say not departmental, but let's say general merchandise stores all over the country. Now, one of the bills was for a single bill of about 23 odd lakhs, 23,12,902 for replacement of one computer or one set of computers or servers. Somehow there was something in that bill that sixth sense, that third eye, that sixth sense sometimes tells you there is something here. So I always encourage that you should please look at each document for more than a minute before setting it aside. We asked the confirmation of the supplier's confirmation promptly given. In fact, the speed with which it came made me more suspicious. So we took the trouble of going through the RTI route and asking the VAT authorities to give us the VAT returns of the supplier, because the supplier would have shown it in his sales and paid that on it. Well, to my surprise, the RTI works. They did send us after a few weeks a bunch of documents. Now again, that was probably 70, 80, 100 documents. But then you have to sit through it, you have to look for something that matters. Well, we looked into it and we did find that it has shown these goods taxable output tax. It does show 23,12,902. I heaved a sigh of relief. I said, wow, okay, no panga, no problem. So this was exactly tallying with my bill figure. So when my people showed it to me, they said it's there in the return. I said, show me the document. I said, come on, if somebody is selling me computers of 23,12,902, and this return pertains to, and this return pertains to the quarter, not even a month. So in the whole quarter, has he sold only one set of computers only to this party? There's got to be something wrong. When you look at this document, which I told you earlier that please let's look at the document. Sometimes they are telling us that I am something to look at. Sometimes they're telling you that please look at me closely. Now here it says description of goods. The other sale is 3 crores, 82 lakhs, oh no, 38 crores, sorry. So his major sale is 38 crores. Why is it appearing in a different column than this 23 lakhs? And you will find that the 38 crore sale is for cooked foods and snacks, semi-cooked foods. Now, please understand where this is coming from. We are talking about an insured who has a large, sorry, before I go to that, Also notice another thing which we had seen in the income tax return also. You see that this return also is revised. And these are live returns. I'm not taking it out. I'm not cooking them up. These are live returns, live cases. So we are talking of an insured who has a general merchandise shops all over the country. He is obviously buying snacks, semi-cooked foods, cooked foods, packaged foods, these chips, all sorts of food items for sale in his outlets. Now, this particular guy has a turnover in these items of 38 crores in 1 quarter. My immediate connection says that this supplier is actually supplying all other snacks and other items to this insured. And because this insured may be one of his bulk buyers, this supplier has accommodated this insured and has given him a fraudulent bill for dealing in computers. Because this is the only bill appearing in this particular head under the VAT rates of 12.5%. The other goods attract a different rate. This attracts 12.5%. You can see here that 99% of his sale attracts 5% rate, and only this bill attracts a VAT rate of 12.5%. So obviously there is something in this bill which is not quite correct. And if I look further, I see that another sheet given to me by the RTI tells me that this particular revised return was also, some tax has also been paid at the time of revising it on 5th of September 2016. This return was filed on, I think, do we have the date? No, we don't have the date here, but I think it was on the same date, the 5th of September. And on that very day, to show this bill, he has had to pay some extra tax. Not only that, if you go through another document, on 6th of September, immediately after filing this revised return, this particular supplier has cancelled his registration. So as of now, the registration of this supplier in the VAT department was cancelled immediately after filing this particular revised return. I think that tells me enough. Even if I'm not able to prove that this is insured's fraudulent document, I can surely prove that the insured has colluded, and I can surely prove that this particular document, even though this document has not been provided by the insured, but he has given me confirmations. He has given me several other documents which contradict this, and therefore I may be able to corner the insured. Now let's go through a few case studies. I think these will be more of my discussing with you rather than a write-up, but I hope the pictures in my discussion are able to take you through these cases. This is the case of a fire, more than a 10 crore fire in a picture tube manufacturing company. Now, one of my dear friends, or probably I hope he's somewhere in the attendees today, he went to the site first as a preliminary surveyor. And I must say to his credit, he was immediately able to spot something wrong. And he came back with a fantastic observation. I really salute you. He came back with a fantastic observation saying that everything else is fine, but there seems to be a case of some kind of a disconnected fire. We have seen earlier that one of the main things to see in a fire is how the fire has propagated from one origin to the end of the place till where the fire has reached. So he came back with the conclusion that there seems to be some disconnect. So if you can see here, if you can see here, these picture tubes or whatever they are badly burnt. Then there is a section in between which is not so badly burnt. And then again, this back section was very badly burnt. In between here, they seem to be picture tubes, etc., spread from here to here, maybe deliberately, because there is no stacking, no storage of material here. But maybe to disguise the fact that these are two different fires, somebody has bothered to remove some material from here and put it here. So, okay, this is one observation. Then when we reached, we had a very peculiar sight to see in the insured's office. This is the office area. This clearly tells me that the fire has not reached here. This clearly tells me that the rods have been removed. This clearly tells me that something is amiss, that something is being done behind the back of the insurance company and the surveyors. Now, there are two ways of proceeding with this from here. Sorry. One way is to confront the insured. I have seen many of us start raising this as an issue right away. Promptly, we get tempted to call the insured to tell him, you think I'm mad, you think I'm stupid. But somehow I personally feel we need to give a long rope before you need to tighten the noose. अब उसको time दो, अब उसको मौका दो, अब उसको in the meantime you can make sure that you're sort of recording the evidences, photos, the videos, whatever. This prompted me to record and take a statement whether anything has been removed. I didn't confront him. I just asked whether you have removed anything after the fire. And after this, believe me, it has become our standard. We have a standard format in which we ask a few questions and ask the insured to fill them. And this is one of them. Have you removed anything after the fire? I suggest we all do that. We ask the insured and in writing. Fortunately for us, he said, no, nothing has been removed. The site has not been touched. Excellent. So we said, where are all your records? He took us to corners and nooks and corners here at the back of this rubble. और उसने हमें बिल्कुल जला हुआ एक कमरा दिखाया. उसमें इतनी मोटी-मोटी किताबें दिखाई कि ये देखो जी मेरे एक्साइज रजिस्टर थे, इतने मोटे-मोटे ये जल गए, आधे जले हुए दिखाए. अब वो जल गए थे. He was right. लेकिन जब आप उनको खोलोगे, तो that was 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old. थोड़ा-थोड़ा unburned portion था. Because the registers were so thick. उसमें पूरा जलना तो मुश्किल है. So we said, okay, आपके register जल गए, fine. Now tell me, क्या जो इसमें कोई current year के register ढूंढो? They put few labels. They were not able to find any register for the current and the last year. Then we said, okay, where were those? They said they're kept here only. I said, fine, write it down. So he declared they were kept here in the same place where the old registers were kept. We took photographs. We put his declaration next to those old registers and he took a photograph. Then he says, I said, what was the name? What was the register type? What was it like? Was it similar? He said, exactly similar. So I said, right, exactly similar register was there, which has not been traceable. This year, last year, those registers are not traceable. They seem to have got burnt. So the important points here is, one, a confirmation that nothing has been removed. Two, a confirmation that the registers were of the current year were there in that rubble. Three, a confirmation that those registers were of the same type, which means this thick. And if the register for 2012, 13 could not get fully burnt, there is no reason why the fire got so attracted to the register of 2017 and 18 that it went and attached itself to that register is difficult to explain. But these are only pointers. We just kept those statements and we came out. Nothing said, no dispute, nothing. Now, next day we sent a few of us, including, I must say, the insurers also cooperated. Inquiries with the guards revealed nothing. Inquiries with the insured revealed nothing. The neighbors are not willing to say anything. You go and have a cup of tea with the vendor sitting on the same street. You ask him for a cup of tea, you talk to him, and he is looking for somebody he can talk to. He wants to feel important. Nobody has come and asked him. He's somebody at the side of the road you don't even look at. But today somebody is coming to him, he's asking him, "Arey, aapne kya dekha bhai?" And that bhai will open his heart out to you. He will tell you that there were 3 trucks that went that night, or 4 trucks, or whatever. 2 went into this factory, 2 others have gone this way, I don't know where. Fortunately for us, the other simultaneously, we went into some media offices. We went into some offices of some newspapers. And we hit upon a photograph, which they had not published, or were probably one of their internal sort of drafts for publication. But this is what it looked like on your left. Now it says they had probably wanted to publish something like this out of harm's way. It says people trying to save official documents and other material after a fire broke out at a TV manufacturing unit. And somewhere here you can see the general manager, very much on site. And you can see these records being removed. You can see also, interestingly, that just inside the gate, this is the main gate, this is outside, this is inside. Just inside the main gate on the right, there are stacks and stacks of picture tubes. But surprisingly, when we did the survey, this area was totally vacant and not affected. So my other request, humble request to all my friends who are listening, when you go to a site, please look for areas which are vacant. Please look for areas where things could have been stored but now are vacant and are not affected by the fire. That may sometimes lead you to something. So this picture was conclusive proof that material has been removed, records have been removed. Now it was only a question of finding it. And thanks to the lovely tea, which cost us just probably 2 rupees, we located one factory right opposite the insureds. This is the insured's main gate, and this is the factory. This is a picture from inside the opposite factory, where you can see these picture tubes stacked up here. And very interestingly, when we tried to enter this factory, naturally the strangers are not allowed. Nobody would let us in. So what do? We tried to video record the conversations after telling the person at the gate. That made the person call his MD or whoever it was. And we had on video recording that, no, I will not allow you in, even though you're coming from the opposite factory. You call the MD of that factory who had approached me to give my space to him. I will only open the gate for him. What does that show? Interestingly, when we first, without telling all this, when we approached the insured and confronted him, the insured says, well, it seems that my managing director, this is a private limited company, not set up with promoters being different from the employees. So the director says that my managing people seem to have clandestinely removed some material without telling me. So somebody is advising him. अब ये स्टैंड ले रहा है कि मेरे एम्प्लॉइज, मेरे मैनेजिंग डायरेक्टर ने मुझे बिना बताए, बिना कंपनी की परमिशन के ये मटेरियल सारा निकाल लिया और कहीं रख लिया. एंड ही ट्राइज टू टेल अस कि मैं तो जी इंश्योरेंस कंपनी को एक 2 पेज की चिट्ठी लिखने वाला हूँ आपके थैंक्स करते हुए कि आपने मेरा माल ढूंढ लिया. बट इंटरेस्टिंगली जस्ट 5 minutes बिफोर दैट ही वाज सेइंग ये मेरा माल ही नहीं है. पहले तो उसने बोला ये मेरा माल ही नहीं है, फिर हमने उसकी it's an imported consignment, so we made him tally the markings with the certificate of origin, with the bill of entry. Once he knew that there was no further way out, he started saying that I'm going to give an appreciation letter. Then we said, okay, forget the appreciation letter. If this is what you're saying, you lodge a complaint against your managing director and your employees. You please tell the police that they have defrauded you. That's when he backed off. He hasn't come back for his claim. I think it's been more than 10 years. Let's look at another case. This is a case where it's a leading brand making atta, banaspati, basmati rice, this, that, the other. And this loss took place only in their packing material godown. This is the shape of it. Multiple types of packing material, multiple numbers, multiple quantities. all mixed up, perhaps deliberately mixed up, so that we can never physically correlate. But no option. Up to physical karenge. So what we started doing is give us some labor. No, he didn't give us any labor, no support, nothing. So we applied our own people with one security guard present. And we told him that we are listing these things. At the end of the day, please sign it. He said, I'm not signing it. So every day we used to send him a registered letter. In those days, there were no emails, listing that this is the quantity listed. If you have any objection, please tell us today itself. Please tell us by tomorrow. These are the quantities listed today. These are the items listed today. Many of these had actually printed dates 4 years, 5 years before the loss. Those were photographed, those were evidenced, and these registered letters were sent to him every day for 30 days. And every day the godown would be sealed by us. We didn't take the keys. Tomorrow he's going to say, you've stolen my material. The keys were given back to him, but we only would put our signed seal on it. And believe me, this claim again, 6 crores, was repudiated successfully without his coming back to us. Because the lists that we made every day were showing a stock of 30 lakhs, 40 lakhs, whereas he had claimed 6 crores. Now look at this building that has got damaged. Eyewitnesses and everybody said, insured said, I have myself come, and when I came, the fire was in the 3rd floor, and I tried to fight it with fire extinguishers, but we could not control the fire. It suddenly spread and to all the floors. Now this is a 3+1, ground, 1st, 2nd, and on top of this there is a tin shed where the fire originated. Ground, 1st, 2nd, and a tin shed. Now fires normally spread from ground to top, but in this case he insisted that the fire had spread from top to down, because the guard also said that, everybody said that, there seemed to be no doubt of that. But look at the smoke pattern on the picture on your left. This smoke pattern to me clearly shows that this fire the smoke has spread from here to here. The smoke from this has spread here. The smoke from this has spread here. So the smoke from each floor is going upwards. I don't see smoke pattern coming from top to bottom here, and normally it doesn't happen. So what is the other way it could have spread? Maybe through the stairs. Sometimes you see staircase having clogged with material which catches fire and the fire spreads. But no, the staircase here is pretty clean. So what do? Obviously, there is something wrong here. But is it enough to invoke policy condition 8? Maybe not. So forensic examination reveals multiple samples on all floors having accelerants. But still, they can say the guard got involved, somebody may have come with connivance, I don't know, somebody may have poured something here, somebody may have poured something from here, we don't know. So what is the next course of action? Fortunately, in his tax audit report, we were able to see some tax audit reports always have a column for transactions with related parties. So we are normally seeing tax audit reports, Form 3 CD, we've all seen that. We normally see, sometimes we see quantities because it has sometimes quantitative details. But it's important to see the fine print. It's important to see the related party transactions. And we saw that from sister concerns, he has sale of 57 lakhs and he has purchases of 10 crores from sister concerns. Fortunately, before reaching this stage, we had already got his confirmation on day 1. Who are your main suppliers? Who are your main buyers? And he had listed this company, whose name I have hidden here. This company he had listed as one of his main buyers, not suppliers. So the moment we came through this, we told him, boss, you have listed this as one of your buyers, not your suppliers. So how come you are buying only 57 lakhs selling only 57 lakhs to him, but buying 10 crores in this year? So please explain. So he came up with an explanation that, this has been wrongly shown as purchases. It is actually sales returns. because I actually sell to this party. My declaration is not wrong. I had given you the right declaration. But I sell to this party. My accounts persons may have shown it as a purchase, but it's actually sale return from the previous year. Now comes the question, if it is sale return of 10 crores, my dear friend, then what was wrong with this material? Obviously, this is rejected material. So you can get into that, old material, rejected material. So this will help you corroborate, because this constituted a major part of the stock claim, 10 crores. So this coupled with your forensic report can be of use, and plus other factors, other normal things that we do. But just the forensic report alone may or may not be enough. Take this case. This is a case of a kind of a herbal products distributor. It is no coincidence that this distributor is very closely related or a good friend of the manufacturer, and therefore he is the sole distributor for this manufacturer all over India. This case is in Bombay, and looking at the peculiarity of the case, the insurers were kind enough to call us from Delhi. You see the two shutters in front. This is the office, and this is the godown. Now, it transpired from evidences of, eyewitnesses, neighbors, etc., that this particular office was opened at 6 a.m. in the morning. The loss was noticed at about 9:30, 10. And this was opened at 6 a.m. because the insured's owner had come and opened the office. But he says he never opened the godown. Now, he says he was traveling abroad, and that day in the morning he had to catch a flight. Before doing so, he wanted to take some papers from the office. Well, it's possible. These are quite expensive medicines or products. So therefore, even though it's small in size, in volume, but value runs into crores. Now, as you can see in this photograph, most of the damage is either smoke, water, heat. So there should not be much of a confusion in the quantities. I think quantities, we did not have a problem. These quantities existed. The forensic experts were appointed for sure. And as expected, no results were obtained. No samples had any accelerants. The cause of loss could not be explained. Even though there was only one electric switch here, which was undamaged. There was only one appliance, which was this air conditioner, which had only very minor heat damage. So it was obviously not electrical. But still, the cause of loss could not be concluded. So what do I do as a surveyor? What I do is that firstly, I look into how old are these medicines, how old is the history of the company, whether it had this kind of stocks before, whether the product is new or old. Well, the product turns out to be only 1 year old. And it is cause for a lot of suspicion. So innovative strategy was called for. I thought to myself, I said, let's do something different. Let's think out of the box. तो हमने क्या किया कि एक market survey का एक format बनाया. We posed as if we are doing a market survey, and I told my young-looking staff that you pose as if you are marketing students, and you go to all the people to whom he has sold this product to, and you find out how this product is doing in the market. What is their view? Normally, you just walk into them, they say we don't have time. Give them some incentive. You devise a format where you say that a new company is coming in with the products that you're dealing in, and this new company will give you amazing discounts, will give you amazing deals to start with, in case you take the time out and fill this format. And suddenly all these buyers of this particular insured were running after my people to fill the form. They were conveying word of mouth from one to the other that a new company is coming. You please catch hold of this form. He's going to give you incentive, and on signing up as a dealer, they will give you a trip abroad. So we didn't have to do much. We just parked ourselves in Bombay, and people would approach us. We went to a few people. And we got hold of as many as 20-30 forms filled with signature, with stamp, with sign, with addresses, everything. And guess what all of them had to say? To look it more authentic, we of course added some competing products, which are known brands. How is this product doing? How is that product doing? How is this product doing? And everybody told us about this product in writing on those forms, that this just does not sell. We have only bought once from this party. This is our supplier. We've been asking him after his life, please pick it back, give us back our money. This product is still lying with us. We can't sell a single piece. That then becomes a little conclusive. And we had as many as 50 evidences to prove it. So these are some of the case studies. I think we perhaps are running out of time. If somebody, Sachin, can tell us, should I run through these, or these are somebody can read these 2 slides later? Are we running out of time?
How many slides pending, sir?
There should be 2, I think, but we can just
So let
run
us
through
finish,
it, you know?
because the attendees are still there and enjoying your lecture, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, some of the safeguards that I would like to suggest, maybe everybody has his own list, so we can add on. First thing to do is to understand the stock accounting system and the reliability of that system. In the very first visit, we must make up our mind as to how we are going to deal with this claim. It's like a baby, how we are going to hold his hand and take him through his adolescence and to his schooling days and to his college days. How are we going to start with this claim? How are we going to finish it? That approach should be decided very early in every claim, and it can be different from every claim. So first thing to do is to understand the records, to grab them, to make sure that they are frozen, they cannot be changed. To see the quantities that are on site. Once the site is clear, you won't be able to identify physically whatever is there, marks on the walls, everything. Most complications are due to afterthought by the insured. Well-wishers and advisors ensure that no, later on they try to add receipts and everything, add purchases. So later the records get fudged. So mostly the records are, in most cases, reliable on day one. So whatever you can get, gate in and out registers, stock registers, last audited balance sheets, purchase and sale ledgers and bills. Now sometimes people will say, oh, I have not updated my records. Most of the time they'll say, oh, they're not there with me, the CA has taken, the accountant has taken. But by sale, kabhi aaj, if you're going to, if somebody comes to you to buy something, you're going to issue a sale bill, no? So please show me what sale bill you're going to issue. That gives me the last sale bill issued. I can freeze that. Sale bills are all serially numbered. There is no problem. Once you have frozen the last sale bill and taken his confirmation, taken his signatures, there is no problem. Purchase bills, incoming material is a little more difficult. So we normally suggest that even if certain incoming materials are there, which are not yet entered, it's okay. Let's make a list of those. Let's number those. Don't just take a bunch. Please don't just take a bunch, because tomorrow is going to tell you I gave you 50 and not 40 invoices. Please number them 1 to 50 or 55 or whatever, and take a confirmation from the insured on day one. I have given you 1 to 55 invoices. Let him write the values. Number 1, dated so much, value so much. Number 2, dated so and so, value so much, and give you the total, or total can be done later, but let's freeze it. Even if you write 55 invoices tomorrow, he'll say, no, this invoice was not 50,000 rupees. It is this invoice of 5 lakhs. We don't want to enter into that argument. So let's freeze everything. His hands are tied, my hands are tied. So we saw in the earlier example, it is important to get everything written. Nothing has been removed. All that has to be written. What were the type of registers? We've seen that in the earlier, so we'll just run through this. Anybody can read it later once this is uploaded. Intact stock listing. Now that's extremely important. Sometimes intact stocks are never listed properly. I suggest, even if there are multiple items, decide, at least consciously decide, which items you need to list. Please let the insured identify the items he is claiming. At least the claimed items, please list the intact stock of those items. On day one, if you can't do it in one day, please seal we have the authority in the policy terms. Please seal that premises with a signed paper seal. Give the insured the key, never keep the key. But please open it again in your presence the next day. And list out continuously the intact items, at least of the damaged type. Layout, etc., needs to be identified sometimes. What all records are being maintained, those need to be listed out. So these are some of the tools with which we could perhaps, again, let me reiterate. There could be the possibility of removal of stocks or other records. So please identify areas which seem to be otherwise intact but empty. Please identify those and try to make sure that those were always empty before the fire. Perfect records. Now that's something which I think most of us are very scared of. If somebody gives us perfect records on day one and volunteers, oh, I have all my records ready. Here, you need the balance sheet, you need the stock register, you need the purchase bill, everything is here. To my mind, I think most of us find that extremely, extremely odd and the biggest red flag that you could find. Thanks, then. I think I've taken a lot of your time, and for those of you who are still there, thank you very much for bearing me this long. And I'm open to any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Atul sir. It's a very nice session, a very informative session for our members. Let's see if there is any question. Members, you can type your question in question and answer section or chat box.
There are two questions listed on the box, sir. One is from Mr. Manohar Sainani. Hi Atulji, in case of forensic examination, in a case, police forensic is a link sheet to insured, and TP forensic agency's report is indicative of use of acceleration. When referred to TP forensic, restrained to commit on police forensic report, the results are diametrically opposite. What could the course suggested?
I think the first part is I could not hear properly. Can you please repeat?
Yes. In case of forensic examination, in the case police forensic gives a link sheet to insured, and TP forensic agency's report is indicative of use of acceleration. Got it, sir? When referred to TP forensic retrains to comment on police forensic report, the results are diametrically opposite. What could the course suggested?
Sir, yes, I did try to touch briefly in one of the slides, but this is a common problem that we are facing. The police report hardly says anything, and the forensic report talks about accelerants. Now, accelerants normally would indicate that it's a man-made fire, unless you can establish the forensic report must clearly establish that those accelerants are not anywhere related to the insured's trade. That's one, which is a minimum that the forensic report has to establish. So my suggestion to most insurers has been, which mostly don't follow, but still my suggestion has been that please share that forensic report with the insured. Please ask him to comment. Please let him say whatever he wants to. But at least tomorrow, after 3 years or 4 years, if he goes to court, his hands are not open. His hands get tied once you give him an opportunity. His hands get tied. He can only say whatever he wants to say within a certain time frame. And let him say what he wants to say, and then review that position in your mind and let the forensic report incorporate that view and either support it if he's satisfied, or refute each point, so that the report becomes conclusive in a court of law. And I in fact even go one step further. I feel that we should even start telling the insured that here is your forensic report. Please go and share it. If you want to establish your loss, it is your duty. Please feel free to share these inputs with the police and ask them to investigate and give you a final report. A mere DD entry will not do. It is your duty to establish the loss. Those are a few suggestions that I have, but I'm sure Senani sir has a lot of others, which I will speak to him and take those inputs later.
Okay, now the second question is from Mr. Om Prakash Agrawal. How do we check the documents wherein no purchase bill or any other documents available?
Do we check the documents where?
Documents wherein no purchase bill or any other documents is available. How do we check the documents?
Okay, so I think Agarwalji, I think you're saying that if there are no documents available, how would we assess the loss? Well, you are very experienced, sir. But for the benefit of some of us who may be starting off, I think the only thing is, one, the physical evidences, and two, the trends. I would suggest that physical evidences need to be very carefully recorded. If you read the presentation slides, which I've skipped, you will find that it mentions that even if some part of the material which is lost or damaged, which is damaged in a fire, even if some part has got metal components, those metal components need to be identified. Those need to be properly retrieved from the debris and quantified and recorded. So, for example, in picture tubes, in televisions, there were cases in the olden days where televisions had those EHD transformers. Today's televisions may not have much, but that's one thing. Second, of course, is the volume. Now, in volume, mostly the length and width is not a problem. The problem arises that mera to maal ji 10 feet tak stack tha. It's all gone now. So, of course, you have to rely on proper recording of the marks of the smoke, etc., video recording, whatever. Forensics can also be used there. Forensics can be of some use in identifying those things as well. So I would like you to discuss with them and expand their forensic horizon as well, so that this also gets incorporated, depending on situation to situation and the value. The third thing, of course, is the trends. Even though the records are destroyed, even though everything is damaged, I normally tend to ask the insured on very first day, ठीक है, आपके पास कुछ नहीं है. Do you remember the last major purchase you did? Nobody can say that I don't. So please let him remember. Please let him write. The last major purchases in this month were from so and so, approximately so many lakhs, so and so, approximately so many lakhs. Fine, let him do that. Because there is a good possibility that up to 1 month or so, 2 months ago, you might get something. It could be a bank statement, it could be a GST return, it could be something which you may be able to rely on, or the past trends. But most of the confusion comes in the last few weeks, the last few days, for which the insured is actually open. His hands are not tied. So please try to bind him on day one. Last purchases, last sales, also very importantly, whether there is any drastic change or any appreciable change from the previous trends, please make him write that on day one. And then you will see he will not be able to escape. If he writes for you on day one that no, my trend has been, more or less consistent in the last 1 or 2 years, same way I've been working in these few months as well, you're safe, boss. Then I don't think there's anything to worry. I hope to some extent that will classify as an answer to my friend.
Yes. Now there are a few questions, but it's 8:30. We passed the time. Sachinji, please take over. I think Sachin ji have some technical problem. So let's conclude, sir. Thank you.
Hello.
Yes, sir. We are here, sir.
Yeah. So thank you, Atulji, for this wonderful, nice session. I hope once again you will come on this platform to share your experience and vast knowledge of this field to our members. Thank you, all the members. Also, I expect members that you should write us on our training at the TISLA.net about this session and also comment on the new platform. So thank you once again. We will meet tomorrow, same at in the evening, 7 o'clock. Thank you, Atul sir. Thank you, members.
Thank you.
Bye. Good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Atul ji. Good night, sir.